The year was 1912. Villisca, Iowa was a peaceful town. The summer sun shone brightly, children played in the streets. It was a time of innocence. Life was simple. On June 9th, the Moore family attended the Children's Day services at the Presbyterian Church. They sang songs, they enjoyed the warm weather, they had no idea that this night would be their last. The Moore children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, returned home with their parents, Josiah and Sarah. Two young guests, Lena and Ina Stillinger, joined them for a sleepover. The house on East 2nd Street was filled with laughter. It was a typical summer evening, but evil lurked nearby. The Children's Day festivities continued into the evening. The town gathered for a carnival. There was music and laughter. The Moore children enjoyed the festivities. They played games. They ate sweets. They were happy. As darkness fell, the families of Villisca returned home. The Moore house grew quiet. The children slept soundly in their beds. Josiah and Sarah retired to their room. They were unaware of the horror that awaited them. An intruder lurked outside. He carried an axe. He moved silently. He had been watching the house. He knew the layout. He had a plan. Sometime after midnight, the intruder entered the house. The following morning, Mary Peckham, a concerned neighbor, noticed something amiss. She had lived next to the Moore family for years and knew their routines well. The Moore house was unusually quiet, the curtains were still drawn, and there was no sign of movement inside. No one came out to greet the day. The usual sounds of children playing and the hustle of morning chores were eerily absent. Mary knocked on the door. There was no answer. She called out, but her voice was met with silence. Fear gripped her heart. She knew something was wrong. The Moores were a punctual family, and this silence was unsettling. She retrieved a spare key from its hiding place, her hands trembling. She hesitated for a moment, hoping she was wrong. Mary slowly opened the door, the creak of the hinges echoing in the stillness. A scene of unimaginable horror awaited her. The hallway was dimly lit, and an eerie silence filled the air. The house was silent. A chilling stillness hung in the air, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. On the floor lay the lifeless bodies of the Moore family and their two young guests. The sight was gruesome, and the air was thick with the scent of death. They had been brutally murdered. The scene showed signs of a violent struggle, with overturned furniture and bloodstains marking the walls. Mary stumbled back, gasping in terror. Her mind struggled to comprehend the horror before her. Her screams shattered the morning calm, piercing the quiet neighborhood. Neighbors rushed to her aid, their faces turning pale as they realized the gravity of the situation. The news of the horrific murders spread like wildfire through the tranquil town of Villisca. The once peaceful community was now gripped by fear and sorrow as they mourned the loss of the Moore family and their young guests. The townspeople of Villisca were in shock. The tranquility of their small, tight-knit community had been shattered overnight. The murders were too gruesome to comprehend. Headlines screamed of the horror that had unfolded, leaving everyone in a state of disbelief and fear. Who could commit such a heinous act? The question lingered in the air as neighbors looked at each other with suspicion and dread. The authorities arrived to a scene of unimaginable brutality. Blood stained the walls and floors, a grim testament to the violence that had occurred. The victims had been bludgeoned to death with an axe. The sheer savagery of the act left even the most seasoned detectives horrified. The killer had taken meticulous care to conceal his identity. He moved through the house with a chilling precision, leaving no trace of himself behind. The murder weapon, an axe belonging to Josiah Moore, was found at the scene. It was a familiar tool, now turned into an instrument of death. It was covered in blood and hair, a silent witness to the horror that had taken place. The killer had left it leaning against the wall of the downstairs guest bedroom, where two of the Stillinger girls were found. Their lives had been brutally cut short. The killer had also covered the windows and mirrors with sheets and clothing. It was as if he wanted to hide the scene from the outside world, or perhaps from his own eyes. Despite the gruesome nature of the crime, the killer had left few clues behind. The investigators were baffled by the lack of evidence, making their task even more daunting. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. The house remained eerily undisturbed, save for the horrific scene within. The motive remained a mystery. Why would someone commit such a brutal act? The lack of answers only deepened the sense of unease that gripped the town. Whispers of fear and speculation spread through Villisca. The once peaceful town was now a place of suspicion and dread. as everyone wondered who among them could be capable of such evil dot. The detectives worked tirelessly, piecing together the scant evidence they had. Each clue, no matter how small, was a potential key to unlocking the mystery. The case captured the attention of the nation. Newspapers from coast to coast reported on the Villisca axe murders, turning the small town into a focal point of national intrigue. As the community mourned, the search for answers continued. The families of the victims were left to grapple with their grief, seeking solace in the hope that justice would one day be served. The investigation would go on for years, with many twists and turns. But on that fateful day, the town of Villisca was forever changed, haunted by the memory of the unsolved crime. The investigation into the Villisca axe murders was long and arduous. The small town of Villisca, Iowa was shaken to its core by the brutal slayings of 8 people in 1912. The crime scene was gruesome, and the community demanded justice. The authorities interviewed hundreds of people. They followed every lead, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. Detectives worked tirelessly, hoping to find a breakthrough that would lead them to the killer. Several suspects emerged, but no one was ever convicted. The lack of concrete evidence made it difficult to pin the crime on any one individual. Each suspect had their own set of peculiarities and potential motives, but none could be definitively linked to the murders. One of the primary suspects was a traveling preacher named Reverend George Kelly. Kelly was an enigmatic figure, known for his erratic behavior and unsettling demeanor. His presence in Villisca on the night of the murders raised many eyebrows. Kelly was known to have been in Villisca on the night of the murders. He had attended a church service and was seen wandering the streets late into the night. His alibi was shaky at best. He fit the profile of the killer. His strange behavior and history of mental instability made him a prime suspect in the eyes of the investigators. He had a history of mental illness and a predilection for violence. Kelly's troubled past included several stays in psychiatric institutions where he was treated for various disorders. Some witnesses claimed that Kelly had confessed to the murders. These confessions, however, were inconsistent and often contradictory, casting doubt on their reliability. Another suspect was Frank F. Jones, a prominent businessman and state senator. Jones had a motive. His rivalry with Josiah Moore, one of the victims, was well known in the community. He was a business rival of Josiah Moore, and had allegedly been having an affair with Moore's wife. This personal and professional animosity made Jones a suspect in the eyes of many. However, Jones was acquitted of the murders in 1917. The lack of concrete evidence and the influence of his social standing played a significant role in his acquittal. Despite the investigation's intensity, the case went cold. The Villisca axe murders remain one of America's most haunting, unsolved mysteries, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places.